The podcasts that I have listened to with the most longevity have been ones that center around a topic I care about and then have enough personality to keep me intrigued. Yeah. This was another mistake we used to make. We would get through the intro and then we'd be like, well, what's going on, bro? And we would like see the drop off on YouTube and be like, okay, we need to get right into the content. Let me pull back the curtain a little bit and I'll talk about how we like logistically do the show. What happened was we ran out of ideas. We had nothing else to talk about. There's one that stands above all the others. And that was during COVID. It's the only time ever we stopped publishing the podcast. And I don't know if that can be quantified. I mean, you're asking us questions like, why does the podcast not sound scripted? And we're like, well, the power of friendship. I would emphasize is that the depth of relationship there is everything.
I don't know what's going to happen on this show.
Hey, before we get started, may I ask a favor? And would you hit that subscribe button? It's super easy in this feed-driven algorithmic world to not hit that because videos like this might just show up for you. But by hitting that subscribe button, it tells us that we're actually doing it right, that we're actually creating content and bringing on guests and having conversations that are valuable to you. So if you would do that, we would so appreciate it, and we will do our best to keep bringing valuable content. Thank you. Hey, it's Josh, and today on Grow Your Podcast, I get to talk with two of my favorite podcasters, Captain Cologne, Brady Shearer, and the Coffee Chaplain, Alex Mills. And if you stick around to the end of the episode, you'll find out why I gave them those titles. Brady is the founder and director of Pro Church Tools, which is an organization based out of Canada, and they help churches navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. And Alex Mills also works at Pro Church Tools, and together they host the Pro Church Tools show. Brady and Alex are voices that I've had in my ears since 2018, and they're one of the stories I often refer to when I'm talking about the value of business podcasting. I'm excited for you all to hear from them because they actually run a podcast from their business. So you're going to hear about what makes people want to listen to a podcast, the principles that they use to create valuable episodes, and you'll get to hear the actual ROI that video podcasting has had on the Pro Church Tools business. All right, I'm done talking. Let's hear from Brady and Alex. So Brady and Alex, why did you guys start the Pro Church Tools show podcast in the first place? Like, you guys could have done a whole bunch of different things. You could have you do blog posts, you have done short form video content, but why did you guys, even before it became a video podcast, why did you start the Pro Church Tools podcast?
So right before we jumped on this call, we recorded episode 869 of the Pro Church Tool Show. The first episode debuted in April of 2014, and back then it was called the Pro Church Podcast. And so there have been a few different expressions of the pod over the years. We're now at 11 years, coming up on 12 in the new year of podcasting. I would say the number one motivator was podcasting is my preferred platform to consume content. And, you know, that's why we're here in our studio right now. And I will acknowledge for everyone that's watching, like, this is a bit of an odd setup because we're normally talking to each other, Alex and I, and we had discussed, should we like angle ourselves to look in the camera? I was like, well, we never do that. That's strange. I can't perform that way. Right. I need to be in my normal setup. And so, you know, Josh is like looking at us and we are not looking at him. So, you know, try to push through that. But I think I can speak for both Alex and I that we love podcasts. Yeah. So much so that when Alex joined our company like 9 years ago, one of the questions I asked him to make sure he was a good cultural fit was
in my interview,
the formal interview, what podcast do you listen to? And he said, I don't know if I want to join this company anymore.
I took on my phone, I put it on the table, and I scrolled through. I said, well, I'm listening to the relevant podcast, and I listened to some sports shows. I didn't know what kind of test I was taking, if I was passing or failing. Yeah,
that was the litmus test for like, are we a good fit? And so, yeah, we love podcasts personally. And so in the professional context, it just made sense. And I think that's what kept it going as well, is because we understand the value of connecting with listeners in like a deep way. And there's no replacement for spending we just do a weekly half-hour podcast, but there's no replacement for spending 30 minutes with someone, listening to them, and almost that like weird social connection that you have with people. The number of times I get on a call or I meet someone in person, and they're like, oh man, I feel like I know you because of the podcast. And we have a very, very small podcast relative to like many in the world. We've just been around forever, and we refuse to stop podding, I guess.
I love it. Well, yeah, and I think what's really awesome about, and for people who don't know, I've talked about you guys a lot on this podcast. I have referenced you multiple times as one of the first podcasts I came across that was like sort of a company podcast that really did what I think company podcasts should do. And it was like you just said, Brady, it endeared me to you guys. Like I learned, like it helped me to know, like, and trust you so much so that when I was working at my church, the moment we needed to switch our church website platform, I was like, I have to work with these guys. I didn't even want to research any other options because I just knew how you all thought. I knew what you guys stood for and the level of quality you were going after. And I was just like, I have to work with these guys. And it was literally because I listened to you guys on the podcast for at least a couple years before I stepped into that role. So it really does what you all wanted it to do, at least in my case. And so, okay, we alluded to, you all don't just have this podcast. You, Brady, you are the CEO and founder of Nucleus, which is a church website builder platform. Now, but the podcast isn't just about that, right? So why did you guys decide to talk about church communications more broadly versus just sticking to the thing that you all do?
Is we launched the platform Nucleus in 2017. It's a church website builder, www.nucleus.church to find out more about it. Right now, north of 3,000 churches have paid subscriptions on that platform. And our company, Pro Church Tools, predates Nucleus by a few years. So when we launched Nucleus, just a little behind the scenes, building software is very challenging in the sense that it's just very, very expensive. And so when we launched Nucleus in 2017, we had saved up like $1 million in the bank from running a profitable company already for close to 5 years. And we were like, you know what? We're doing agency work. We're doing a lot of content, but our company might not have longevity if all we're doing is agency work and the type of work we're doing ever falls out of trend, falls out of favor with the greater church community. And we had this idea for this different type of church website builder, and we wanted to take a shot on that. And so that was kind of the origin for it. Pro Church Tools is kind of the overarching organization that houses Nucleus, the product. It also houses socialsermons.com, which is our social media agency where we work one-on-one with about 200 churches creating content for them on a weekly basis. And then we have Pro Church Certified, which is our certification program that runs for a full year where we basically teach and mentor people in all of the creative disciplines you need in the church tech world. Pro Church Tools is the company that holds all those things. And from the very beginning, I got my start as a media director in a church. I'm learning these skills. I'm like, if I can learn these things, other people can learn them. And so content creation and basically teaching everything we know has always been the heart and the foundation of our organization. And so that has been expressed in podcast form, YouTube channels, social posts. Back in the day, it was just blogging. And so church comms is one of the topics that we hit on. We like to say we help churches navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. And so that would be the reason why we don't focus exclusively on Nucleus. That's just, one of the products that we run.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Now, okay, I wanna ask about you talked about shift. I want to talk about another shift, which is your all shift from audio only podcast to video. Now, if I have the timeline right, I think it was in 2003 when you guys made the shift, 2023, when you guys made the shift from audio only to video. But for, I don't know, 9-ish years before that, you had a video or an audio podcast. Why did you make the switch to video podcasting?
So we actually were video podcasting before that, but on our main Brady Shearer YouTube channel.
That's right.
And so I think that goes all the way back to like 2019 with the origin of the Pro Church Tool show. And that was when I think, Alex, I brought you on.
Yeah. We were doing Pro Church Daily at the time. We were doing
Pro Church Daily. That's right.
We were doing five short episodes a week. And Brady mentioned it earlier, like this podcast, because Brady's been at it since 2014. You know, we're over 10 years now, has gone through an evolution, almost versions of itself. For so long, it was primarily like an interview-based show, and then we got into the Ask Brady show, and then Pro Church Daily, where we were tackling mostly questions that came in from folks working in real churches. We would tackle one at a time, spend 10, 11, 12 minutes a day, and I think that rhythm got a little bit interrupted by COVID. You know, looking back on it now, kind of this global mile marker in all of our lives, right? In March of 2020. And our rhythm of work was disturbed, and we started working from home. And so when we kind of reconvened, honestly, it was a couple years later, 2022, we were back working in the office. We enjoy a hybrid schedule now, but like kind of most of the time back in the office, it was a time to kind of reevaluate again. Okay, the world, communication has gone through an evolution in the last few years, and so the show evolves once again. And that's when we started dreaming up of building this studio that we're sitting in now. And we've kind of I don't know, it kind of feels like we're in a sweet spot right now. I really love where our show is at right now, the Pro Church Tool show that we've been publishing on YouTube for a couple of years, once a week, every Wednesday. And certainly it will evolve again. There's nothing immediately in sight. But right now, just in the social landscape and the type of content we're creating and just so eager to share with churches on now a weekly basis, thank God, not a daily basis anymore. I really feel like we're kind of in a groove right now with our weekly show. And every time we sit down in these chairs to hit record and talk on YouTube now on a weekly basis, I feel so eager to share what we sit down to share about, knowing that in the landscape of being on YouTube now, because it's a video show, there is the possibility of discovery. You know, previously when we were just publishing through Libsyn, you know, you have the folks that subscribe to you, and that's good, and you have to do a lot of work to get people to subscribe to the show. But now in a discovery era on social media, we've had episodes of our show that we're really proud of, and the content is really, it's meaningful to us, but we know it's valuable to the folks who work in churches. We've had, thanks to search, some episodes like reach a very broad audience, and that's kind of what I think we're enjoying at this time of publishing our show to YouTube in kind of the iteration that it's in.
Okay, now I have a specific question that I think you guys do this really well, and it's actually a debated topic whether or not people should do this or not. And I'd love to learn from you guys because I think you guys do things pretty intentionally. And so my question is, if anyone, so just for context, if anyone's ever watched the show, you know, they will get to learn a little bit more about you. You know, Alex loves him some coffee. Brady loves him some fragrances. You know, the banter, you guys banter a lot, right? And I wouldn't say a lot. You do, it's an intentional segment, right? And, or at least it feels intentional because it happens every time. But like why do you guys do that piece? Why have you decided, you know what, this is actually a helpful piece that we kind of just want to keep in there?
Yeah, so for the podcast that I listen to, and this gets, again, back to like doing what you like, the podcasts that I have listened to with the most longevity have been ones that center around a topic I care about and then have enough personality to keep me intrigued. So we would say it is like, come for the content, stay for the camaraderie. So like, I listen to a fantasy football show, and I go so that they will tell me, hey, here's who you need to pick up on waivers this week. Mm-hmm. And then they'll do questions and answers about like anything and everything. And I am just as invested in the parasocial relationship that I have with them as I am in the fact that I need to, you know, pick up a running back because my other guy is on bye, whatever it might be. The same for the sports that I like. Like I'll listen to a reaction podcast for the Toronto Raptors, my favorite sports team. And like the podcast will recap, hey, here's who played well, here's who didn't. And then it's like a bunch of Chinese guys. They'll bring on like their other friends and then they'll talk about like the dim sum they had. And then they'll make like jokes about Hong Kong that I don't really get, but like I'm learning.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so like I'm just as invested in their relationship professionally and personally as I am in like the interest that brought me there. And so I think it makes listening just better overall. But Alex?
Yeah, it's so funny you brought up that example because just this morning, I'm driving my kids to daycare and I'm listening to a podcast that I listen to every day. It's a sports podcast, which is a playback from a radio show from yesterday. It's called Overdrive. They broadcast from 4 till 6 on radio. And I listen the next day at 2 times speed. And I've been listening to these 3 guys for, I think they've been on the show together for 8 years at this point. And I had the thought this morning driving in the car, like, oh, this is not going to last forever. One of these guys is going to move on. 2 of these guys are going to move on. And I'm really going to miss this. And what I'm going to miss is my, you said it, parasocial relationship, my investment in the ongoing bits. It's not what they have to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs that I'm going to miss. There's all sorts of people talking about the Maple Leafs. It's the dynamic of these 3 guys. And so there is something about that human element that really binds people together between broadcaster and listener over the long haul, which is the type of parasocial relationship we're trying to build through our show. Now, I will say, and you mentioned, Josh, like it seems intentional. It is our banter. It's not scripted. And my dad still doesn't believe me. My dad will listen to the show. He'll be like, you and Brady, like you don't plan out to say this, whatever. And I say, no, like Dad, that's just, like we hit record, we roll it, and then we stop. Like there's no cuts. It's just us.
Yeah.
And I think the reason we can pull that off is because we have a lot of like relational equity as friends. So when we turn on the mics, it feels natural. But we do have to be self-aware and reflective often of like, hey, was that too much? Did we spend too much time on that episode talking about, you know, A, B, or C? Do we need to reform that for going forward for the next episode? And so we've gone back and forth. We've made touches here and touches there, but it certainly is not scripted. We don't block it out kind of formally, but we certainly are aware of like, okay, people come to the show to get value from the content, to get a new social media policy or what have you. But like Brady said, they really do stay around for the glimpses of camaraderie and humanity that we choose to show. We are mindful of it, but it's certainly never scripted.
Yeah, like one of the formats that we've experimented with in the past was not called Pro Church Tools, it was called Bro Church Tools.
Right.
And the purpose of those episodes was like basically us just answering questions, half about church, half about like life.
Yeah.
And I've probably heard the most positive feedback from those episodes.
Yep.
And yet they were also the least viewed.
Right.
And that is like a demonstration, a reflection, an illustration of what podcasting is. It is not about reaching wide. It is about reaching deep.
Yes.
I have a carousel from last week on Instagram. It has 2 million views. Our podcast from last week has like 1,200 YouTube views.
Right.
You would look at that and think to yourself, 2 million better than 1,200, which it is. Social is a springboard. It's a great way to introduce yourself to people. And our efforts on social are almost always angled at getting people towards greater depth of connection with us. One of those ways of connecting deeper is through the podcast. And the reality is that, you know, if you only ever reach wide, you end up becoming like a meme page. You've ever seen a meme page be like, we're dropping merch, and it has like 8 likes and everyone like boos them?
Right.
It's just like, hey, we're here for this one thing. But then if you only ever reach deep, you're going to narrow your audience and handcuff yourself the ability to reach a lot more people. And so balancing both is really tough. And we've gotten this wrong. Like we've done episodes where people are like, what was valuable to me? You were kind of just like riffing on things. And so like we have tried to find a balance for it. I would say the ratio currently is like 80% content, 20% banter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Bro Church Tools format was originally a copy of that Raptors podcast that I love. They would have a show called The Banter Pod. They were 4 hours long, and the dudes would just talk about everything. Those are my favorite podcasts.
Right. Yeah.
Was it because during that period, the Raptors sucked? Look, let's not get into that. Championship in 2019, banners hang forever. Yeah. But we tried that, and it like didn't hit, although you could make the claim that, well, people say that's their favorite episode. Right. Like, right, but like that was like too narrow on the wit side of things. And so now what we do is, and you'll notice this is like really practical advice for podcasting. If you go and watch one of our episodes, we will have a scripted intro where Alex and I go back and forth. And the purpose of that is to cast a vision for the episode and to basically confirm the promise we made with the title combined with the thumbnail. Yep. And then we have a very quick intro. It lasts like 15 seconds or fewer. And it's the same thing every week. And I think if you listen every week, you probably get a little bit tired of hearing it. I go through it really quickly. There's always one part that's different purposely. So when I want this to be practical, okay? This is the intro. I'm going to go to the intro, okay? Well, hey there. Welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady Shearer, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. And then I will always give a different introduction to who Alex is. I'll call him Father Fungi because he loves mushrooms.
Right.
Or I'll call him, Bishop Barista because he loves coffee. And that's different every time. So if you are a repeat listener, you're kind of always waiting for that touch of a little different thing. But if you're brand new, you get enough of an intro, but it's not like this long thing. And then we always get right into the content. Yeah. This was another mistake we used to make. We would get through the intro and then we'd be like, well, what's going on, bro? And we would like see the drop off on YouTube and be like, okay, we need to get right into the content. And so we would get like right into point number one. Yeah. And then after it's, we've gotten into things and we've fulfilled the promise that we've made to viewers and listeners, then we would descend a little bit into banter here and there to provide flavor, to provide color commentary. Think about like sports broadcasts. If all you had was the guy being like, he passes to duh, he shoots, blocked. You need the color commentary being like, I don't know, man, this guy, I don't think he's very invested tonight. And that's the ideal. So that was my Chris Collinsworth voice, I guess.
So good.
I don't know, Al.
That's great. Well, and I always loved not only, all right, so what are you going to call Alex this week? But I'm always curious how Alex is going to respond to that. Because sometimes seems like he loves it. And then sometimes you catch him completely off guard and it's awesome. So, okay.
It's always a surprise too. Again, like I said to my dad, I'm like, Dad, it's not scripted. I don't know what's going to happen on this show.
And sometimes I'll record them and I'll say something extremely perverse and we won't keep it. And I'll do it just to mess with him.
I love it. Well, okay. Going to this is a question I did not send to you ahead of time, but I'm thinking about it now. Going back to the unscripted piece to this, obviously, like when you guys will go through questions or you'll have a topic and things like that, but I think what's really interesting is how natural and engaging your all's like interaction is when it's like talking about things that you already know, or you already know the other person knows. And so, for example, my business partner and I, we will be the ones who talk on this podcast, right? And we'll go back and forth on, all right, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. How do you guys, I feel like there is a level of awkwardness that can come when, all right, it's you two, you guys aren't telling each other anything new. Mm-hmm. How do you guys keep that piece so natural and unscripted as you're talking on the podcast? Does that even make sense?
Yeah, let me pull back the curtain a little bit, and I'll talk about how we like logistically do the show.
Video needs to do something for your business. And here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we create video content that helps people know, like, and trust you because it's you on camera. We love talking head video content, whether it's podcast format, webinars, or other social media content. We want to feature the people behind the brands because we believe that when people see your face and hear what you think, that will attract the right kind of customer. If you're a CEO, a thought leader, a marketer here in the greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area, I'd love to talk with you. Just book a discovery call today at cincinnatipodcaststudio.com/discovery or click the link in the description.
So we're recording this with Josh on a Wednesday. We also record on a Wednesday. That's kind of our big recording day at the office. So on a Wednesday morning, I will typically sit down, myself, Brady, the director of this company, I will sit down in front of my computer in my home office, open up Evernote, give it a new title, 869:, copy over some of like the formatting that's in every single week's show notes, and then I will start thinking of what do we want to talk about today. Because to Alex's point, we don't script anything that's like color commentary, banter, personal, but we have structure for like what we're going to talk about in terms of the meat. Right. So the episode that we recorded today, the title was something like Fix Your Church's Team Culture When It's Whack or something. And so I had structured out like 5 big ideas along with the scripted intro. And then I will Slack Alex, usually around like between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. each Wednesday, and say, notes for 869 or up. He will then go and consult those notes. And the relationship that we have on this episode is that like I talk the most because I'm like the director of the company and I'm like the public face. And then Alex is like the co-host. He's like the support. And so I want to hear Alex's part on this because my job is pretty easy. My job is I wrote notes myself and I am now going to talk through the notes that I came up with. And I was thinking about this today as we were recording. At any moment, Alex has to like be on his toes for like, is he going to stop and look at me? Because he doesn't know when, and I'm going to be like,
is he going to come in?
That's a great point by me, Alex. And then, so I want to hear his perspective on like, Brady just said something that Alex has to be like, yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah. Okay. This is such a brilliant question. And I think it's relevant to so many shows because very few podcasts are single personalities. See, I think of the Bible Project. You ever listen to the Bible Project?
Yes.
You got Tim Mackey and the other guy.
Yeah, John Collins. Yep.
And yes, and they do. I don't know, maybe the best job of this. And I think I take a lot of cues from that relationship because what I find for this show to be as successful as it is, this show needs a captain, and then it requires trust. And so I have to accept that like Brady's the captain of this show and I have to let him play that role, like be the quarterback, but he also has to trust me to play my role, which is a lot more fluid, which is responding, reacting, adding my own value that is always unscripted. I very rarely add anything to the actual notes in Evernote. I've prepared like my mind and my heart based off the notes that he's given me. So I kind of have an idea of maybe what I want to bring to the table, but it requires like a great measure of trust between the two of us because we don't ever chop the show up. Like it's always just a one take. To be able to pull that off, we really do lean on our relational equity. And I know I've brought that up already in this conversation, but if we weren't friends or didn't work closely together, if we didn't have relational equity to give us something to trust in, I don't think we'd be able to pull off what we do. I think you see that in Tim Mackey and John Collins. Tim Mackey is the Bible scholar and he brings the meat of the episode. He's the quarterback. But John Collins does such a masterful job of reacting and engaging and frankly being non-anxious. That's a big part of my role on the show is just like not being anxious about what I want to say or anticipating when I'm going to speak, but following the outline, letting Brady call the plays and then reacting to what's going on in the moment. For me as a person, I feel like that comes a little bit natural to me. It's natural for me to be a public speaker and to be on microphone and to have to be thoughtful about my words in a moment's notice. So I think that kind of eases the pressure in the room. But there's a lot of things going on to make that dynamic successful. And I think we found something like just pretty special. That's not to say that type of relationship between two other people in another circumstance couldn't be cultivated, but it does have to be cultivated. I just don't think you could jump into the studio with a coworker and pull off what we're trying to do. I think it would require an entirely different kind of mechanism or approach for how to record a podcast together.
Yeah, and if you go back to like our first episodes in 2019 and compare them to now, you'll see like Alex and I both talk differently.
Totally.
And that's like just like the sweat equity that's just unique from the relational equity from just doing these reps and getting in the studio. I've noticed every time we've changed rooms, like we got in a different studio and I'm sitting in a different place and it just felt uncomfortable in that new studio. Like the angle that I'm looking at Alex is different. We used to sit where we were like kind of like positioned angled, looking kind of at the camera, but we could also turn right or left to each other. Yeah. Now we just stare into each other's eyes romantically. And that was like a different change. And I was like, where do I look? Like, I'm just looking at this dude the whole time.
Right.
And irrespective of if you have like relational equity outside of your professional setting. I think what we also bring is a complementary relationship to the podcast. Another version of our show's title could be The Pastor and the Pragmatist.
Right.
Because I am like the intellectual, heady, very much like, well, here's the formula I'm about to introduce to you. And then Alex is the real life bivocational pastor who works at Pro Church Tools full time, but is also the pastor at his church. And so I'll say something like, and that's how you're effective. And he's like, well, but keep in mind the Lord also. And then he'll kind of come in with that. And so he brings an aura of like legitimacy to the show, because I'm not just like this person that's separate from ministry, that's not in the trenches every week saying like, you should do this, this, and this. Alex is like, yeah, and I am a pastor at the average sized church in North America, and here's how I interpret what he's saying. And so I think that complementary element is also critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's, I think you guys have one of the most unique relationships, and kind of like you were saying, Brady, like having somebody who actually could be your target audience as somebody who is on the show, who is a part of the company. One, like you said, gives legitimacy, but then the complementary piece, it's, you guys aren't just coworkers, you guys are friends. And you've cultivated a lot of that. I think there's also, Alex, I love how you were saying that you realize, okay, so Brady's going to be the captain. He's going to kind of steer the show, and I'm going to jump in where needed, where it makes sense. And not everybody can be the captain, right? And so making sure that you are really there as a support role to him is huge. And it's funny that you mentioned the Bible Project. Fun fact, I used to work for a company that John Collins founded before he started the Bible Project. So anyways, fun fact. Okay, so that's really helpful in terms of, just trying to figure out how do you have this complementary dynamic when it's two people from the same company, and you guys know the thing. You guys aren't sharing new information. So like me being the host of this podcast and me asking you questions, I'm finding things out. You guys probably don't learn hardly anything new from each other. You guys have probably had a lot of these conversations before, but the way you go about it, I love how you said, Brady, you take time to plot out the topics and the different ways you want to approach the show. And then Alex, you review it ahead of time, and then you're just ready to rock whenever Brady calls on you or whenever the Spirit prompts you, right? So, okay, one of the things I've loved about your show and I've benefited from was the way you all engage with your audience. So there's two things I'd love for you all to talk about. One is, how do you engage with your audience, and then how do you promote the podcast? Those are two different buckets in my mind. The engagement is, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you. You guys know how you engage. So what are the ways you engage with your audience? What have you learned works, doesn't work, that kind of thing? And what made you start wanting to engage with your audience in the way that you do?
Yeah, what happened was we ran out of ideas. We had nothing else to talk about. And so we said, we're going to do the mailbag. And so, perfect. One of the ways that we've done it historically over the years is answering questions. That's been a big one. What often happens is, even if it's not formally presented in the format of a Q&A show, the topic of a show will have originally been initiated by a call I had with the church, by a question that was sent in, and then we repackage that in the form of a formal episode structure. The other way that we've done it is by asking questions on Instagram. So we did a recent episode called the worst part of church communications according to you. And so I had asked on Instagram, what's the worst part of church communications? And we get, hundreds of responses. We would categorize them based on what was most popular. And then we would present them and then say, okay, if you're dealing with this issue, maybe consider this. And so that's kind of like an audience-led version of the show. But at the end of the day, every single episode is in some facet audience-led based on feedback that we get from them. And that's one of my favorite things about creating content on the internet is that you get this unvarnished feedback from your audience. And I think the more that we publish and the longer that we've been at this, the better we've got at understanding the needs of our audience and what we have to offer that can help with those needs. Because you publish and you look at the response rate, you look at the watch time, you look at the recurring formats and packaging styles that consistently show to be top performers, and then you go, okay, repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test, as we like to say. And then in terms of promotion, for the longest time, we were only available through audio, like you mentioned. And in the early days of 2014, 2015, 2016, podcasts were pretty novel. There weren't too many. And I have screenshots from those times where it's Furtick, Grishel, Shearer, and we're right next, in the top 10 of podcasts in the Christianity category on iTunes, just because there weren't that many.
Sure.
And so we would run hey, leave some reviews for our show. And the iTunes algorithm was so predictable back then. It's reviews? This must be the greatest show ever. This must be a mega church.
Reviewed
so clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so promotion became more difficult once we entered the discovery era of social, kind of TikTok comes around. We're thinking 2018-ish. And so what we've done is we've begun doing, short form excerpts from the podcast, but we'll do them a bit differently. So we'll record an entire episode, and then I will once I've written the episode structure, script a short form video. So what we won't do is record this and then hand it off to an employee and say find a compelling short form. We found that content was more predictably effective when I basically wrote the short form video in a back and forth. And that has presented an even more challenge because now we are scripting what we're saying back and forth. And presenting that as authentic, I don't think we always get it right. But to this point, millions of views, no one has been that didn't seem real. So either those people are harboring those thoughts secretly and not sharing them, or they're coming off good enough. And so what that does is it gives us, this Instagram reel got 150,000 views. And at the end, we say, comment, whatever, and then we'll send you this full episode over DM. And we do the same with our Instagram carousels. If we don't make a short form video, we'll make a carousel. It's 7 values to install in your church's culture. And it's a different expression of the full form podcast. And then on the final slide, it says comment culture, and we'll send you this full episode with a cheat sheet. And so what that has done is it leverages Instagram's element of discovery and allows us to take that platform that's great for width and social as a springboard and then translate those people, introduce those people to our long form show.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Okay, so when you think about scripting those short forms and inserting those into the long form conversation, does Alex know, is it in the Evernote notes that, all right, this is where I'm going to insert it? Or is it just, I've already gotten how I want to say this and I'm just going to throw it in there because it's a definition I've come up with or formula or whatever?
No, it's a separate recording. So we do the whole show.
Oh, it's a separate recording. Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll say, okay, time for the real re-record. And so the way it always gets set up is I say an audible hook at the beginning. So I'll be the best free tools for churches. And then Alex will say,
we've been trying out these tools for the last year and it's finally time to reveal them.
I'll go, tool number 1. I'm I'll have scripted what Alex was going to say. And I don't let him talk at all in these reels. Yeah. I say, I'll do the hook, and then Alex will be
60 seconds.
Wow, great point. Tell us more. And then I'll basically say it all, and then I'll say, and if you want this full episode, comment Alex, and we'll send it to you over DM. And we'll literally record it as a separate thing after the whole show is done.
That is insane. Okay.
Don't tell anyone.
No, you're right.
Well, and this is actually having this conversation with you, Josh, because I know you've been a longtime follower of Brady and the Pro Church Tool stuff, and surely you have seen these reels on your Instagram feed, and it seems like they've never stood out to you as the fact that they've been re-recorded or scripted. So I guess that means we're doing our job.
Right. That's insane. So
because now, after we've pulled the curtain back, you're going to go, the next time one comes across your feed, you're going to notice and be like, that's awful.
Totally.
That's what he was talking about. Yeah.
That's not even close to looking organic.
I can't believe he fooled me for this long.
What does that say about me?
That's interesting. So you don't clip anything from the full show.
No.
No, we used to try, and we couldn't predictably get good stuff. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like, when we do this for churches, it's because I could never get a pastor to do this well on camera. Like, I do this full time. I don't need to clip from the long form because we don't do interviews. And that's the other point. Like, if we were doing an interview show, I don't think this would work because I couldn't like get the guest to do that.
Sure.
And this is like also speaks to how we've changed the show over the years. We used to be an exclusively like every week was a new guest. That was probably the first like 5, 6, 7, or 8 years of the show. And the reason we changed was, again, back to my personal preference, which was I noticed the podcasts that I listened to that didn't have any banter or were purely interviewer hosts a new guest each week. I never listened to them for like longer than like a few years. I eventually like got burnt out because burnt out's not the right word, but I eventually just like organically felt like I could move on because I wasn't invested in any camaraderie. If you're not invested in the camaraderie, you're just not, at least if you're me, going to stick around indefinitely. And even if you are invested in the camaraderie, you might be like, oh, Braid's talking about the same thing he always talks about. This show has been on for 12 years. Like even doing Q&As, there's so many times you can say, stop the scroll on social. And so we changed it because I was like, I enjoy the camaraderie and I enjoy when I get to sit in on the friendship of the real people. Mm-hmm. If it's a new guest every week, it's like when I sit down to watch a new movie, I'm like, who are these people? And you have to spend the whole first act basically establishing who this person is and why you care. And that's what has to happen every time you have a guest. And so like, it's a different type of like, listen, and I'm not saying ours is better because if you look at some of the top performing podcasts, it's like interview shows. So clearly there's a huge demand for that. But for me, at least, I prefer listening in on, I understand this relationship. I know these people. And it's not like, hi, we're joined by like John. And I'm like, I don't know who Dr. John is. Now I got to like learn if I care about him or not. Okay. We have guests irregularly, but what we do is we have recurring guests. So we have the same people that come on, a couple of times a year. Yeah. And so hopefully then, if you are a regular listener, you're like, oh, it's this guy again. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the difference between, say, you guys and like Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, right? Especially when I was in church communications role, I would listen to every freaking episode you guys did. Easy. Like I didn't question it. And I think it goes to what you're saying. With Diary of a CEO, I don't actually listen to every episode because either A, I don't know who this person is, or B, I'm not 100% sure about the topic. Like maybe I'm interested, but then maybe I'm interested in the topic and I've never heard of the person. So I'll maybe listen to a little bit and then I'm like, no, I'm not going to listen to the whole thing. I have to know both people in order for it to be a no-brainer for me, just like I would listen to you guys and it's a no-brainer. So that's a very, very fascinating point. When you talked about, you were talking a little bit about why you started recording the social clips after versus pulling clips from the long form episode. And I know you're constantly kind of reviewing and iterating and learning and all that. Do you have a schedule or a system for how you review how a podcast is doing, specifically podcast, how the podcast is doing? Do you review each episode? What's kind of your rhythm for that?
Yeah, so it goes back to like the policy, repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. And so repeating the best means identifying formats or packaging for shows and then reusing those. We're big advocates and fans of repeating things that have been proven to work. The Instagram carousel that I mentioned earlier that got 2 million views last week, that's the third time I've published that carousel with the exact same slides. I just go into my drive and I publish it again. And I know it's going to perform well because it has performed well in the past. And this gets back to the best part about social, which is this unvarnished feedback. The longer you're at it, the more you're confident with your audience, what they need. And so you can predictably create things that will resonate with them and that they will find compelling. I've used the word packaging a couple of times. That is so important on YouTube because if you can get that title and thumbnail right, you can convince someone that this is worth your time. If you think about what you just said, Josh, about the Diary of a CEO podcast, so a new episode pops up and you'll look and basically evaluate, does this topic and or person resonate with me enough to give my time and attention? And so like, what's interesting is knowing that certainly there have been episodes that you have chosen not to listen to that you would have really been happy you had.
Right.
But the packaging wasn't compelling enough to get you to do that. And this is kind of the tricky part, but the great part about publishing on YouTube, where potentially you can reach, tens of thousands of people, or you can reach your core audience like normal. You basically have to figure out, like, how can I present this idea in a way that people are like, wow, that is really interesting and want to click? Because I'm confident in the content of each episode, but I have to spend a lot of time on the packaging to make sure that it has a chance of reaching a broad audience, or at the very least is compelling enough for our existing audience to want to give it their time as well. So that's a big part. And then forget the rest is like, so repeat the best, forget the rest, continue to test. For trying things and it's not working, okay, great. I might be passionate about this. I might think churches should care about it, but either the way I'm presenting it is not compelling, so again, back to packaging, or this topic is just like not something on people's radar. And then continue to test is like, we always need to keep experimenting, because like one of our packaging or title formats that works well is like best $0 ... So we discovered that when we did an episode, a little while back, like best $0 marketing strategies for smaller churches. And it was like, it performed really well. Okay. So then we did another one, best $0 social media tools for churches. Like, that's a normal list post that I might have like presented in the past as like how to do better with social media analytics, which is not nearly as compelling as like best $0 social media tools for churches, even though the content might be identical. And so we have to continue to test to identify new things that we have yet to discover, because there's certainly an amazing content format that would help us get a podcast episode to 100,000 people. And I just haven't figured out the combination of title and thumbnail and intro. And so that's the continue to test element that you always want to save, 10, 20, 30% of your calendar to just trying new things, throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks.
Gotcha. All right. Well, so speaking of seeing what's not working, I'm curious, can you guys like remember one of your biggest, I'm going to call it failure. I'm not afraid of that word. I kind of like the word. What's one of the biggest failures or misses you guys have had with the podcast that you've grown from?
There's one that stands above all the others. And that was during COVID. It's the only time ever we stopped publishing the podcast. What do you remember?
Yeah, that was the one that came up for me. I was going to make a joke about the elevation episode, but I won't joke about that.
Oh gosh. Yeah, don't look into that.
Yeah, don't search that. It's our most watched
international
incident for all the wrong reasons.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, during COVID, I mentioned it earlier about how COVID was this global disruption. And looking back, with hindsight, we can see not just in our work life, but in all the other decisions, our personal life, our church life, in all the ways that we made decisions during that time in an environment that was foreign to us. We had never lived through something like that before. We can see the ways that we made good decisions with the information we had and see the ways that maybe we would have made a different decision. And, during that time, because our work is predominantly online, we had the freedom, the liberation to work from home. And so that was a choice we made. And because we were working from home, Brady and I made the choice like, hey, let's take a break. Let's not try and make a podcast studio at home that achieves the same level of audio quality or whatever. Let's kind of ride this out. And we look back on that time with, we could call it regret.
Regret is the word.
Right? Yeah. Just look back on that time and wish that we would have made a different choice, because we really lost some headway we were making and kind of felt like when we started podcasting again, we were really working from behind. And now, of course, it wasn't insurmountable. Like I said earlier, we're really happy with the place we're in right now. But who knows where we would be if we had chosen to just to make a different decision and maybe make ourselves a little bit uncomfortable, as opposed to making the decision we made to kind of take a break. I don't know, maybe because of the trauma, I don't really remember how long it was that we didn't podcast for.
Yeah.
Like 18 months or something? Ooh, was it that long?
That long? I don't think it was that long, but yeah, again, memory hold.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Right. Man, okay. So if stopping the podcast was a failure, actually let's talk about that just for a tiny bit more. Because you talked about like how that was something you would not do again. And Lord willing, we'll never have a pandemic like that. So hopefully it doesn't happen. However, like, why was that such a problem? Like, why would you say that was such an L for you guys?
Well, the problem in the moment was that our show was Alex and I sitting next to each other at a table.
Yeah.
And so we would have had to come up with a brand new format that in my mind would have been a big step back. It's like, oh, gross. Like, we're recording over Zoom. Like, this doesn't look great. Who wants to listen to this? And we were publishing, like, that was our core YouTube content. And so in the moment, we were like, we need to pivot our YouTube content to instead be about like churches navigating digital ministry because they're having to embrace it in ways they never had before. And we were seeing some of our biggest YouTube episodes ever because we were helping churches like live stream for the first time or understand like digital ministry in ways that they had the luxury of ignoring before.
Right.
And so like we had basically said, hey, we need to put a pause on good to chase after better. In the long term, it just like stunted the growth and audience of the podcast. And then we were like working from behind, like Alex said, to basically catch up. And so that was kind of like the regrettable part. Our mantra that we preach so constantly is no weeks off. And that was like the only time we've ever taken a content break since like 2012 when I first like published the first blog post on prochurchtools.com. And so like in 15 years, like that's the only break we've ever taken. And for, you know, our part, we saw the consequences of that. And building an audience, building attention and trust is like our ultimate focus. You said at the beginning of the show how the attention and trust that we had built with you inevitably translated to you trusting us with your church's website over at Nucleus. So attention and trust is the biggest thing. You can only get trust when you first have attention. And we were basically punting on attention on the podcast platform by just not publishing. And so that's why I look back on it and say, hey, that was an oversight.
Yeah. That's really helpful. So, all right, I'm going to ask you guys probably two more questions. You guys have been awesome, and this is honestly just gold. When I talk to different CEOs and founders of different companies, one of the questions that inevitably comes up is the ROI of video podcasting. Can you share for you guys what has the ROI of the Pro Church Tools Show been on the company?
This is one that's really difficult to quantify, and I'm sympathetic to the hesitation from the founder, from the director of the company, because the numbers and analytics of a podcast will never be glamorous. Unless you are like a top 0.001 show and you just like dominate the charts. I would say we have a very successful podcast that I would have a great difficulty demonstrating purely on analytics.
Right.
We've been doing it for 15 or 10 years, like 12 years. And the number of times I've heard from someone like Josh, what he shared at the beginning, I can't count. And I always think, really? Because like, have I met every listener in real life at this point? Because like, we're all, we only get like, we've started counting on views per day instead of just looking at like the number of views per episode, because when content is indexed on YouTube, people are not just like listening to an episode and then never going back. You have old episodes that are being found and discovered and listened to. And so like, we'll look at views per day and we'll see like, whatever it is. I don't know if I know the number off by hand. I think it's like close to 2,000 views per day. And so you think about that over the course of a year and you're like, okay, like that's a pretty big number. But in terms of like to compare that to Instagram, like let's say we have like 1,600 views per day, 2,000 views per day on the podcast YouTube channel. In the last 30 days, our Instagram has 5 million views. So like what's 5 million divided by 30, right? Like it is so much greater. And yet what I would emphasize is that the depth of relationship there is everything. Would a person that just like saw one of our carousels and be like, haha, good point, keep scrolling, are they evaluating our products? If you're a church, if you're a company, are they any closer to taking a next step towards your company? Yes, they're a bit closer because like they're aware you exist. And now next time you come along, maybe they're that much more likely to follow. Maybe they're that much more likely to comment the keyword you say and then connect on a deeper level. But if all you had, again, is that like width of connection and you never had depth, then you're just never going to create that relational, parasocial equity that you have with people. And I don't know if that can be quantified. I mean, you're asking us questions like, why does the podcast not sound scripted? And we're like, the power of friendship. It's like, how do you quantify that? I don't know. Like, Alex and I have done a lot of cool things together outside of work, inside of work, and you can kind of sense that on a non-quantifiable level. And I guess maybe that's good because maybe that means fewer podcasts. We know that very few podcast creators stick with it.
Yeah.
Like the old stat that went around was like, the vast majority never make it past like 10 episodes. Like we have a 10 episode rule. I have a 10 episode rule. When someone reaches out and they go like, and Josh, you can tell me if I like didn't abide by this rule because I don't think I asked you. People are like, hey, can you come on my show? And I'm like, how many episodes do you have? And they're like, 3. And I'm like, once you have 10, ask again. And I'm happy to come on. And then most people just never get there. And so then you don't dedicate an hour to a show that will never like have any longevity. So not a ton of like concrete there. I don't think that's super helpful because the nature of the podcasting is kind of this hard to quantify essence.
Well, and it's funny to hear you say that because you are such a man of tangibles, of numbers that can be quantified, that can guide our decisions. And yet, something instinctively and intangibly that I agree with, which is it's impossible to quantify the value of this show in numbers because we do sell products, right? And Josh said it, that when he was in a purchasing position for his church, he's like, I want to work with Brady and Nucleus. And so we do sell things. It's not why we do this show, but we know instinctively, and like I said, intangibly, that the content we create here is first and foremost, valuable to the people who choose to show up and listen. And it's our free gift to them. And that is the purpose of the show. But secondarily, every conversation of ours that folks choose to listen to builds trust. And that is something that we just know is worth investing in.
Man, that's really good. And Alex, I'm really glad you brought up the fact that Brady is so like data results oriented, and the fact that he is thinking like actually podcasting is something not only like that we should really keep doing. Like this is an important part. It's enough to carve out time in your day to do this. That's
okay. Fine. You know what? I got to stop you there. The jig is up, Josh. Look, Alex and I, we used to get to be spending a lot more time together. Okay. And then now we both have 2 kids. And so I forced him contractually to sit down at a table with me for at least 1 hour every week and talk to me in the guise of a podcast. And, you pigeonholed me close. I couldn't prove to you why this mattered. Again, it's just the power of friendship,
Fine. It's because I just wanted my friend. Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
I love it.
Our wives can't argue with this. It's work.
Oh, this works, sweetie. What were you talking about? Oh, don't worry about it.
They don't listen anyways.
They hate this show. Oh, we can say anything that we want. They hate this show. In a million years.
Amazing.
Like if, planning for Christmas, we could openly talk about Christmas gifts, about like anniversary plans, like any type of secret surprise in a million years. They would never find out.
That's amazing. Oh, okay. Last question for you guys. If you were to give 3 pieces of advice to a CEO or a founder who's considering a podcast, what would those 3 things be?
Okay, so number 1 is think about your time horizon. Are you prepared to commit to this on whatever recurring interval you have decided on? So if you're going to do a weekly show, a daily show, a bi-weekly, a monthly show, an infrequent show where you're not entirely certain on the publishing schedule, but like every year you want to do at least like 15 episodes, whatever that is. And then you need to commit to that. There is no fruit, virtually any anyways, from like doing a show for a quarter, doing it for 1 year, and then hoping that translates to something. That's just not realistic. And so you have to be aware of your time horizon and like what you are committing to and ask yourself, is this indefinitely sustainable? Number 2, is I would consider all of like the different potential values that could come from a podcast that are unrelated to like bottom line revenue. So I was talking with one of my very close friends, and he started a podcast in the last year. And I basically told him a number of times, don't start a podcast. He's already very busy. And he was just like, you know what? No, I'm doing it. I'm finally doing it. I was like, okay, great. Go and do it. And I think he's done like 10 to 15 episodes so far. And what this has brought to him that he did not expect was he has begun having conversations with people that he otherwise would not have like had an in with because he said, I'd love to bring you on my show. And that was like something that I experienced at the beginning of this. Like I was 23 years old running a company, Pro Church Tools, and I had no one knew who I was. And so I would bring people onto my show who I looked up to. Yeah. And that gave me like the ability to talk to them. And that became like a form of networking and a form of like establishing myself in an industry where I was brand new and very young and still like kind of learning the ropes on things. So that would be number 2. And number 3, in perfect fashion, Alex, that's you.
Number 3 would be consider the size of room and consider the ventilation. We've been in this room for about 2.5 hours at this point, and it's so hot I'm about to have a heat stroke. So you might want to consider a well-ventilated room for your show. Yeah.
I kind of feel like you guys have been talking about the ventilation in that room since you built it.
Yeah, it's a real problem. Yeah.
But it looks good.
Oh, it looks freaking phenomenal. I love it. That's great. So consider your space. It's very important. I love it. Well, guys, thank you again so much. Not only just for hopping on and talking to me, taking the time to do this, but thank you for the years that you have been doing this. Because again, like I said, I've benefited. I know, like, when I left my role as the director of communications at my church, I told the guy coming in after me, I'm like, you have to listen to these guys. Like, this is like, you should not listen. Like, if you don't listen to anything else, listen to these guys. And you guys have just proven yourselves as trustworthy, I guess, experts for a long time, but you all are also just really enjoyable to listen to. So thank you for the years of putting work into this, and thanks for talking to me today. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Grow Your Podcast. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're in the greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area, and you're a CEO, you're a marketer, you're a thought leader, keynote speaker, someone who is trying to invest into their personal or business brand, I would love to talk with you. We think video podcasting is one of the absolute best ways of growing your brand over time, because we think that when people see your face and hear how you think, you will attract the right kind of client. So if you want to learn more about how video podcasting can do that, let's set up a discovery call. Just go to cincinnatipodcaststudio.com/discovery or click the link in the description. And I want to thank you so much for your time, attention, and trust, and we'll see you next time.